Hi, welcome to the ChicoBag podcast, where we dive into conversations that inspire us to leave everything better than we found it. I'm Andy Keller, your host, and I'm passionate about building a more sustainable world, one step or large step at a time, from reducing waste to strengthening community. This show is your guide to practical solutions for a brighter, cleaner future. Today, we're exploring an unexpected tool for healing and connection: tabletop games. My guest here is Seth Ewing, founder and executive director of Operation Tabletop, a nonprofit dedicated to preventing veteran suicide by fostering connections through tabletop games. Think game nights that build real relationships, reduce isolation, and create a safe space to share the hard stuff. Seth, welcome.
Hey, Andy, thanks a lot for having me, man, and for offering up your platform for me to talk about Operation Tabletop. It's an honor, and I really do appreciate what you're doing in the community as well.
Well, thank you, Seth. Tell me about your origin story. How did you get into this?
In 2017, I was sitting in a bed in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, and just got done with some pretty grueling training for like the last 2 weeks. I was exhausted. It was late at night. It was like 11 o'clock, and I'm scrolling Instagram, and I get a notification from my brother. It was a like on one of my photos. And I thought to myself, hey, I should hit him up. I should just say, hey, check in on him, maybe give him a call. But back home in Virginia where he was really late at night, and it was like, 12 o'clock. It was about midnight. And so I didn't, and I went to bed and went to sleep. And the next morning my phone was blown up by my wife and my mom. And so when you see something like that, your heart immediately thinks something's wrong. And it was a notification that my brother had committed suicide that very night around 1 o'clock. And so not long after I had already gone to bed. And so it really hit me. I still struggle with the guilt of that. But through that, during those struggles, what I did is I focused on work like anybody else would do. Is I just ignored it, pushed it down, and focused on my professional duties. Ended up applying for a pretty prestigious job here in Northwest Florida at the Herbert Field, a part of Air Force Special Operations. And that was going good for a little while, but that job went away. Essentially, they cut the program that I was a part of. And so that I experienced another loss of purpose. And so anybody who's been in the service knows that it's not just a loss of purpose whenever you get out. You're constantly experiencing loss of purpose because you'll go to a new duty station, and you'll find a group of friends, or you'll really enjoy that job and you find it very purposeful, and then they'll take it away from you, put you somewhere else, and it won't be the same. And and so you do feel like you lost purpose, and that's what I experienced. And so what happened after that is all the feelings that I had been pushing down and covering up with this newfound purpose in special operations kind of, you know, erupted, and all the feelings from the loss of my brother came at once. And so I drowned myself in video games, stayed at home, isolated. I was drinking all the time, and not just like beer, but, harder stuff like bourbon. And it was, during the day, and it just wasn't good. Um, but what kind of kept me going through that was Dungeons and Dragons. I had a group of friends that I had made at one of my previous duty stations that I made contact with, and we played Dungeons and Dragons um, every week. And that little bit of interaction really kept me going. Uh, there, there was a time where, during the darkest times of my life, where Dungeons and Dragons with my friends acted like a lifeline for me. It really kept me from pulling the trigger and committing suicide. And I attribute I attribute that group of friends, and I'll always love them for that, and giving me those fun times and keeping me from going further down in the into the darkness, if you will. And also alongside of that, Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, obviously, a very supportive wife. I started seeing some professionals, some professional therapy, and they helped out a lot. And on the back end of that, you know, or during the time of that, our group had grown pretty substantially, and ended up having to turn away people because we're like, hey, at Dungeons and Dragons, you can only have probably at max 8 people, and that's really pushing it because you go around the table and each person takes a turn, and the more people you have, obviously, one of the turns take. Um, and so we couldn't bring on more people, and I didn't like that because I didn't want to turn people away from something that had been such a guiding light in my life. And so I brought this idea to my friends of, hey, how about we just connect them with the same folks we are going to kind of turn away? How about we just create this like community where we connect people over Dungeons and Dragons, create a Discord and everything. And then it kind of snowballed into the 501c3 idea because we wanted to be able to fund this and really get it growing and make it a national thing. And so here we are today. And we do 2 game nights a month, both at Hurlburt Field and at Eglin Air Force Base, along with occasionally off-base events in the local community where local community members who aren't veterans or active duty come out and have a good time as well. And yeah, our events yield anywhere from 35 to 55 people on average. And so that's a lot of opportunity for connection and for intervention as well. People seeing the red flags during someone who might be dealing with something and engaging with them and asking them the difficult question, man. And like, hey, I noticed something's going on. Do you mind if I, ask you some more questions and see about that? And then just being a homie. That's really what you're doing. You're just being a
Yeah.
good dude and asking if this person's okay, and then pointing them into the right resources that could help them. And it's peer support because you have that lived experience. You know what it feels like, and so it's easier to empathize and identify when someone else is dealing with that. But that was a very long answer from start to kind of finish, but that's the story, man.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Seth. I mean, you're describing, a painful experience that brought you to your knees, and it's so wonderful that you were able to figure out the path forward out of the darkness. That you know, tabletop games was your lifeline, and if you didn't have that, um, who knows what would have happened. But it's great that you're identified it and you're sharing with others, and you've created a nonprofit to help others connect. And what comes up for me is just this idea of loneliness. And we're seems like, especially young people today, we're more connected than ever. We have more access, to communication than we ever have. Yet, there's chronic loneliness. And a lot of people play video games, with their friends, but that's not the same kind of connection as a tabletop game. So, um, tell me a little bit more about, like, why do you think tabletop games, are so important? Like, what is it really filling, for people? I mean, I think that, I kind of think the answer is obvious, but I want to hear from you. What, when you sit around the table with people, what do you see as, the best thing that's coming out of those experiences?
Oh man, yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to start with the loneliness piece. You're totally right. Though we're more digitally connected than ever, we're more socially disconnected. And a 2-time Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, he said that loneliness is an epidemic and it is the precursor to all illnesses. It's one of the number one biggest health concerns in the country, alongside obesity. Which, you hear that and you're like, dang, it's up there with obesity. It's because it's the precursor. You start to isolate and you're lonely and it feeds into that. You start to eat more, you start to be more sedentary, and so that's where a lot of like the coronary heart disease can kind of come in. But where tabletop games come in and why they're so special is you're getting people to the table, which is the obvious part, and you're physically connecting, socially connecting in person, face to face. You're not doing it through an avatar, through a screen. Um, and what's most notable is when we do these game nights, and you look back at some of the photos that we take during the events, no one's on their phone. You have no one sitting there typing away through a text message. They're present, and I think that's really the the key thing about these games is that it brings people into the present and 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 engaging with their peers. Um, versus like you'll see some people playing video games to connect, and video games are a great connector. We're Operation Tabletop's not anti-video game. We're just pro tabletop game specifically in order to address those who suffer from internet gaming disorder, who are addicted to video games. We want to get them out of the house and give them a different opportunity to connect. But yeah, you'll see people who might be in the same room playing video games with somebody, but they're back to back looking at the screen, and so they're not even. And we all know that um, this is a random statistic, but like 80%, I think it is something high. It's a high percentage of communication is through nonverbals. It's through eye contact, and facial expressions. And so when you think of it that way, it's really important to be present and engaging and face to face.
Everyone needs that outlet, the chance to connect. And, as humans, it's so important. And, having something to look forward to. Um, what I've noticed, is gaming is designed to be addictive. When my daughter plays Roblox, and these games are designed to never end. And then they get you hooked, like, oh, good job. Just spent 2 hours and you get bonuses, for being on the game that long, which just seems really destructive to me. Um, the nice thing I think about tabletop games is you're connecting, um, and there's an end to it, right? There's a point where the game ends.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like video games, not all of them, but a vast majority of them are designed to be addictive, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Um, they are addictive, and they can be very addictive, especially if you are already susceptible to behavioral addictions like internet gaming disorder, because you're already facing some levels of anxiety and depression. Um, they're so they're just so engaging, and they really trigger that dopamine response, and so that's what kind of really keeps you engaged and wanting more and more. But
Yeah, and I would call that earned dopamine. There's a lot of things that we do. You mentioned some of the vices that took over, when you were dealing with the loss of your brother, such as alcohol and video games and isolation. These a lot of these things, that we do are, is just our quest for dopamine. And the best kind of dopamine is the kind that you earn. When you get in your car and you go and you connect with someone, that takes effort, and sitting and playing a game, and then getting that feeling, at the end or during, is that earned dopamine. Or going on a hike, with a friend, and achieving something, getting to the top of the mountain and then back down, that's earned dopamine. And that's the best kind, and in this society, we get these dopamine releases so easy. We just have to open up our phone, and then the little, noises and buzzers, start going, and we get a dopamine release, and it's just so easy to get it. But that's not earned dopamine. It's different. It doesn't feel as good. It's not as long lasting. It doesn't sustain you, and then you want more. And so that's that cycle. So, I always try to earn my dopamine because it lasts longer. It feels better, and ultimately, it meets more of my needs as a human. That connection, and the things that make me thrive. So, One of your strengths I saw is vulnerability. One of your, or excuse me, one of your core values as an organization. Can you tell me more about that? It's obviously something that I think, I haven't been in the military, but I imagine, military people, they want to show strength, right? And how do you deal with vulnerability? Because ultimately being vulnerable, can be a strength. But how do you have that conversation, and how does that show up in your groups?
Yeah. In the military, it definitely can be seen as a weakness. Um, because yeah, obviously in the service, you want to project strength, and when when you think vulnerability, you think exactly what it is. It's being open and honest, and letting people know how you're feeling with someone, so that way you can be taken care of. And I think the military does a really great job of encouraging that from the top down. It's always encouraged, like, hey, go seek help, take a knee if you want, or if you need to. They definitely do encourage that. However, it's not always practiced very well, or encouraged at the lower ranks, because especially in critically manned career fields, like you can't like they can't afford to lose somebody already. They're already operating at a very, very limited capacity. And if one person goes down, it puts even more stress on the team. And so, whether they intend to or not, consciously or unconsciously, of um, that one person tends to be ostracized. They tend to be looked at like a pariah because they're seeking help. Um, and it's putting stress on the team, and so that stress on the team kind of translates back to them. And even if it's direct or indirect, that person feels that, they feel like they're a burden because they're not doing well, and then that creates another cycle. But the way that vulnerability, when we approach it at our tables, is like, if you're playing a game, a role playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, or Pathfinder, whenever whenever you're sitting there and you show up to the game for the first time, and your arms are crossed, and you're just there to kind of check it out, and you see somebody like a big burly dude who's like standard military, like, you know get up and start acting very silly and really role playing their character, it gives you the permission to be like, you know what, if this person's opening up and being silly, and uh, it kind of, like, maybe I can do it too. And then they start to uncross their arms, and they start to feel more comfortable, and then that can translate back into their everyday duties. And even if it doesn't, at least they have a place of reprieve where they can feel vulnerable and open with a group of people, because they're all sharing that same experience.
Another one of your core values is humor, is it not?
Oh yeah, that's got to be in there.
So how does that translate, and what what have you seen around the table in regard to humor and its benefit, for the group?
Yeah. So, um, humor, man, that guides. I mean, that's a huge part of everybody's life, right? But especially in the service, because you kind of just have to laugh to keep yourself from crying sometimes at some of the stuff that you get asked to do, or places that you have to go. You just have to make light of it, through the dark humor. Um, and so we really lean into that, because it humor cuts through the tension. Somebody might show up and, again, be crossing their arms and have a bit of an attitude and act like they may not want to be there. Um, but they got drugged there by a friend. It's hard to keep your arms crossed, or it's hard to, like, not it's hard to keep yourself from laughing when the person who's about to win at Uno gets hit with that draw four, like, and then right after that gets hit with another one. It's moments like that are just hilarious. And then obviously the craft talking that comes with it too, and just the energy around the table. Uh, it's fun, and I think when people laugh, it it lightens the mood, it lightens the atmosphere, and so we definitely want to, um, in like incorporate that. Obviously, it's innate when you're playing games anyway, but we want to make sure that everybody's laughing and having a good time, because it recreates that camaraderie that you would experience basically on, an everyday service or just normal life, right? When you're with your friends, but especially like when you're downrange and you're in you're going through some stuff and it's hard. All you have are the people that you're there with, and you're constantly, finding ways to laugh through the pain, I guess you will. So yeah.
Yeah, so being vulnerable, having a sense of humor, it certainly helps, all of us get through hard times. You mentioned earlier purpose. So when people are exiting the military, now what? What's my purpose? And then between assignments, there's that same reset of like, what now? What's my purpose? How do you approach that with folks, that are kind of between things and they don't know what their purpose is? How do you help people find purpose? And I know a lot of people, may be experiencing a lack of purpose or a unclear purpose or um and I know from my own experience that finding a purpose is really key to happiness. And so tell me more about what your experience in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main way that we offer purpose and people find it is by leading games. So they'll hear about it, and they'll have a board game that's been sitting on their shelf forever that's collecting dust, and they haven't had anyone to play it with, but they've just been dying to play this game. Well, you can grab it, dust it off, show up, and find people at these events, at these game nights to play it with, and these folks might gather around and want to play it next time too. Now you've kind of created this little niche group that enjoys playing this one game, and so you kind of find purpose because now you are putting on these games for people. It particularly works very well with role playing games because you have to have somebody leading those games, telling the story, um, and guiding the players through that story. Um, but there's a great instance where this worked really well. It's our very first success stories. One of the one of our community members, they come up and they say, "Hey, I've got this game. It's called BattleTech. It's a tabletop skirmish game. It's very there's a lot to it. It's not like a party game where you can just learn it in 5 minutes." And you couldn't find anybody to play it with. We ended up finding some folks to play with and that are also interested, and now they've got a core group that they play each month. It's a recurring thing for them, and so now they've kind of given each other purpose. Um, so yeah, that's really the big way. And then also, if you want to volunteer in this, like to host your own game night, that's also another way that you can develop purpose. But just coming and showing up and just even playing a game, it gives people something to look forward to.
So what's your dream for your organization? So you have what, 38 people and a couple sites where you're doing these game nights. What would be your idea, of success, in the future? Like how big could this be, and what kind of impact would you want to have on the world?
Oh man, that's a big question. uh, man, peak success. Obviously, it would be getting the suicide rate down. 17 veterans commit suicide per day. If we can impact that and get it down to zero, that would
Are you,
be that would be obviously the big one. But as far as the organization specifically on how we want to grow and to impact that, um, we would like to see ourselves anywhere that there's a USO. Like you you go into a USO in an airport and there's a rack of Operation Tabletop board games right there for you and your family to play with during a layover, right? Or uh, anywhere like at each base, you go outside of the gate, you go to your very first duty station that may be in a very big city, and you're from a very small town and you don't know what to expect. Well, uh, but you grew up playing board games. Well, there's a small community connecting folks over board games right outside the gate, and you can kind of integrate that way. Um, but yeah, that's just nationwide, uh, overseas bases integrated deeply into the active duty and the veteran communities, where folks can just reach out and play these games.
So people can contact you, like, for example, if there's people listening here that live near a military base, they want to help. And can they contact you and set up their own kind of affiliate branch of your organization?
Yes, I will tell you it's a lot of work. Anybody who's listening to this and is interested in starting their own affiliate branch, or what we call like it's a chapter, but we call them tables. You're going to go out and you're going to set up your own table. Um, it's it's a lot of work because you obviously have to run the program. You got to find volunteers. You got to be fiscally responsible and do all the reporting, and so that's a very high level involvement. But uh, we're starting to create a model because we're very young. We're a startup nonprofit, and we're creating the framework on how that looks to be able to provide to people. Say this is what right looks like. If you're interested in setting us up in your town, here you go. Here are the tools, and we're here to help you. It's definitely been a learning process on how to do that. But the very small level, if you're just looking to um, get involved and host games, just host a game. Just find people, um, set up a game night, and tag Operation Tabletop and spread the word. By generating more support and getting the word out, really helps us grow, and then be able to provide more support to set up more actual tables where people can, you know, engage and have these areas of these game nights to connect and actually have like free food, free childcare. And that's definitely something I want to touch on, Andy, is like we, at each of these events, we provide free childcare, um, free food, delicious food, not just, hot dogs and, you know, baked beans or something like that. Not that that's wrong. That's delicious food, obviously, but it's not like, it's not cheap. We have some pretty delicious gourmet stuff. And then we also do free giveaways and of board games. We partner with local tabletop or local game stores, and they will do in-kind donations of games or gift cards. And the purpose of all that is to incentivize people to get out of the house and get to the table. Because how do you fight an addiction? How do you fight a behavioral addiction like internet gaming disorder or isolation, like how do you fight, people who are suffering from mental health conditions? It's two things. It's one, incentives, to break down a barrier such as the childcare, the food, giveaways that kind of incentivize people to come out. But the second thing is peer support. It's you being a homie, knowing that your other friend over here is isolating or they're going through some stuff, and what you do is you insulate them, right? If you notice someone's isolating, you insulate them, um, and get them help or bring them to something and get them out of the house.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I imagine people that are part of your group, I mean, not only come for themselves, but they come for, their friends that they make in the group. They know, if they don't show up, there's going to be an empty seat. And I imagine, showing up for yourself is just as important as showing up for others. And I know in my own life, in my family, I find, we'll sit in front of the TV or we'll be on our phones on the couch, and we've made it a practice of actually playing games. And the other day I took all the electronics, including the TV, out of the house. And I said, okay, today was no electronics day. And we ended up playing games and laughing and having a great time. We got a bunch of dopamine, rushing through our systems as a result. And it was great. So anyone who's listening, game night is something you could do in your own home. You don't have to, you know, do something big. You can start small, and just have games with your friends. I know I have a few friends that will come over and we'll play cards together. And it's such a fun time because we get to connect, we get to eat good food and laugh. And that is the best medicine, the best way to pull you out of a stupor if you are in one. And certainly the work that you are doing, Seth, is so important. And I just congratulate you on moving through your darkness, coming up with a solution for yourself, and then sharing that with others. And that's a lesson we all can learn is, you know, it step by step. And I'm so glad, that you're helping others not commit suicide. You mentioned 17 people a day. That is US
Yeah.
service members? Or
Yeah. Yeah. So 17 service members commit suicide a day. Um,
wow.
it used to be 22. Early global world terror statistics, it was 22 a day. Um, but the recent suicide annual report that came out that the VA put out, the Department of Veteran Affairs put out, is it says it's changed to 17, so it's gone down. And I think a combination of things kind of go into that, right? I think a lot of it is community based involvement and resources. It's just folks taking care of each other. Organizations like mine or one of our partner organizations, Irreverent Warriors. They do like silky hikes. They wear short shorts and they take people out on hikes, and it's a great time, and it's just goofy and um but
Well, I think that I see the progress from 22 to 17. 17 is not acceptable. So thank you so much for um, helping get that number down. And I'm sure if we talk again, that, we'll be making some, strides in getting that number down. And obviously we need more people to be involved in this organization that you've started. So anyone listening, how can they reach out to you? What is your website?
yeah. So you can reach out to me direct at Seth at OperationTabletop.org. We also, our website, we have a contact sheet. Website is OperationTabletop.org. We have a Facebook. Just search Operation Tabletop, and Instagram as well. And so you can reach out to us on those platforms.
Great. Well, Seth, thank you so much for the work you're doing, helping to make the world a better place. Appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Andy. Thanks for having me.